welcome to the Big Hope Letters. Oh, I'm like,
What did we like?
Okay, let's start that again. All right, never mind. We're too lazy to start again. All right, so welcome back. We want to talk about some stuff today. We're not going to tell you what we did this week because it's the same as we did last week.
It's in fact the same day. We're just killing two birds with one stone.
Okay, so we're going to talk about timing on miracles and about trials. So we got kind of got some of the hard stuff to talk about today. So I just recently had an experience with a miracle in my family. My cute cousin, when she was 15, she found about the joys of drugs and alcohol. And I just have been spending the last couple of years with her interacting because we didn't interact for about 50 years. And maybe not 50, 45 years, long time. And she's had this life that has been a doozy. It's been hard for her. And she did a lot of good and she missed a lot of opportunities. We were just talking about this. But it's so interesting now because, like, all of a sudden in her 60s, which, by the way, 60 is a lot younger. If you're 20, you don't understand how young 60 is. So you can't know, but you'll know eventually.
You have to be over 60.
You have to be over. Young. You have to be in your 50s to know how young 60 is. But anyway, so all of a sudden, the Lord is really moving in her life, like all these little miracles, all these little things, all these just little pearls, like I always talk about. All these things are happening and it's kind of shocking for her, But there's something, it's like a plant that you plant and you harvest. You can plant a radish seed and have a radish in 40 days. But if you plant a peach tree, you don't get a peach for several years. And in humans, that cycle can take a lot longer until suddenly the Lord is like, okay, she's almost ready. She's aligned. She's ready, and the Lord just like pushes his dominoes that he's been stacking up for years. And he snatches us. He saves us. We're finally ready at these particular points. But the interim in between, until our fruit is ready, until we are ripe, it can be so hard especially when we're praying for somebody else or for ourselves.
Well, and our plan, again, if we tie back to a little bit of what we talked about earlier, our natural tendency is to say, well, we know all the answers. Like, we know what's best for this person, and we don't. God knows what's best. And sometimes people have to find him on their own outside of maybe what we think, which is ironic.
At least not on our timeline, right?
Yeah.
We can't be impatient with the Lord's timeline. And I think that's one of the hardest things as believers is when somebody has a different timeline and the Lord's like good with it. He's like, okay, you might need to bottom out, or you might need to have X, Y, and Z experiences before you're ready to believe in me. And that's okay. He is not hindered by those. He lets us get as messy as we want, and until we hate the dirt, until we hate the mud, and we are caked in it, and our eyes won't open because our eyes are glued shut with mud. And when but what happens there is the internal miracle, the spiritual miracle, that our heart starts to change. And that is that, and he's like, it doesn't matter what he has to go through with us for us to get to that point where we want him. So that's what just saying, when the timing doesn't look like it's right to you, and you're waiting for things that you want or waiting for things for somebody else, that's when you are playing the trust game with God. And you're like, okay, you can handle this. You can handle it. I'm going to trust you. And that takes some real spiritual muscle. on our parts to
Well, and
trust him.
hindsight's 2020. So looking back, after we are in the middle of the miracle, we're like, oh, okay, I
Yeah.
see. I was sitting in the restaurant having breakfast with Paul the other day, um, and I overheard our neighbors talking, and they were talking about this woman who had lost her job. She was absolutely devastated. It was her job. She loved it. She didn't know what she was going to do. She was quite upset that the circumstances had changed and turned out to be not so wonderful. And she went through a period of time when you know, she she wasn't comfortable. Fast forward 2 years, and this woman now has a home right by where she works. Her job is better than she could have ever imagined. She's making more money. She's able to make all of her payments. Life is better than it was before she lost her job. But we don't see what the Lord's doing in our lives. We only can see through our natural tendencies of that natural eyes, if that's what we're looking. Oh my gosh, she lost her job. Oh my gosh, she doesn't have a, we get caught up on all the stuff while we wait for the miracle that God has in store, which is 100% better than what we could have ever dreamed of, you know?
Yeah, and some things, and also he lets us, we all affect each other, and sometimes somebody else's bad actions or bad decisions affect us,
Mm-hmm.
and at times it seems like that's just so unfair, and you're just like, God, how could you let this happen? And he's like, okay, I'm not going to control you, and I'm really sorry that this person has hurt you, but I can help you and I can heal you. And guess what? When you turn when you've gone through some of these things, you're going to be stronger. You're going to have more compassion, and you're going to turn these stumbling blocks into stepping stones, and you're going to climb to heights that you couldn't have climbed to without those things. So I don't want to say that I don't think that every bad thing that happens to us is something that God puts into our lives for us to grow. What I think is that we live in a fallen world, and bad stuff is going to happen to us, and we are going to get cancer, and we are going to struggle in our marriages, and we are going to have trials with our children. Those kind of things happen to us. But God's like, here, let me show you how to handle this. Let me help you through this.
Let me carry you through this. I can't take it away, but let me carry you through this tough situation. It reminds me of a story my father in law told me in the 1980s. If you're old like us, you might remember there was a real estate market crash and interest rates went up to 16%. So sometimes we complain about our 7% and interest rates were I remember 16.5%. And my father-in-law was a developer. So he was in the middle of developing a subdivision. And when interest rates are 16.5%, people can't afford the payment anymore. Payment just becomes outrageous. And he ended up losing everything. He lost a subdivision. His house was in foreclosure. He said it got so bad that he didn't even know where the next meal was going to come from. So picture with me this family of 8 children.
Yeah, say that.
8 children. And of course, back then, the mothers didn't work. The mothers stayed at home and raised the family. So it was him. And he said that there were times when Greg would go out, and this is probably filled in a little bit with Paul's story, but that Greg would go out and poach a deer just so that they would have something to eat. Regular meals then became meals with a lot more potatoes because they were affordable. But there was a time when they were considering breaking up the children. Do they send the children to different families because they didn't have the finances to do it? And in the darkest of dark, they were still in contact with the Lord. They still prayed for the Lord to help them through the situation. And not quite before they lost their house, one of the neighbors came to him and said, "Can we talk to you?" And they sat down with him and they said, "Look, we have a house that's a block and a half away. It's a big house. It will be enough for your family. Will you take care of this house for the next couple of years? We want to go live in this other house in another area of Utah, but we need someone to help us. And we would love it if you could move in. We don't want you to pay rent. If you can just maintain it and pay utilities." This was such a blessing through this hard time. I remember one of the siblings was so upset to think that God wasn't even in their life. How could God allow for this to happen? Such an unfair God to take everything away. And yet, through this experience, if you were looking through those spiritual eyes, not only did they have a family member or a family friend offer a house, there were people that were leaving food and money on their doorstep to take care of them. Here I am crying again. There was a family friend that they hadn't talked to in years. He said, I just felt like I should give you $5,000. Now, $5,000 isn't a lot of money right now, but 50 years ago, that was a lot of money. The Lord didn't snap his fingers and take him out of this really awful, hard situation, but he carried him through it. Because they turned to him and they were close to him, they were able to see blessings that happened throughout that whole experience. Somebody in the ward paying for one of the kids' college tuitions. Just so many miracles that helped him get through that really tough time. And he's there for us through our hard times. He can't take us out of our hard times most times. Sometimes, there is a miracle that is performed that is his will.
But even Jesus Christ didn't get saved out of his sacrifice that he needed to make for us. So the Lord's like, okay, you're going to go through this, but you can do it, and it will make you into something better.
Yeah. And I just want to testify of that. There have been times in my life when I struggled, and I did worry many, many, many years about money. Are we going to have enough? There were 12 years that Paul would contribute, but I had to be the main provider. Like, it was a very stressful time, and I would always go to the Lord, and he would say, "Don't worry about the money." No, he would say, "Everything's going to be okay." And at the time, we didn't get blessed with lots of money that came running down, raining on our heads, but we always had enough. He always provided enough through little tender mercies through that hardship.
And it's like he told Peter, go out to the apostles, go out with no purse and no script, no money, no extra clothes. Just go and let me provide for you. And it's not that he's going to provide for us if we don't do anything.
Yeah.
But when we're on his errand and we're trying to follow him, he's going to help us. And the funny thing about the Lord is when he helps you, a lot of the time, I know there's other times, but a lot of the time, he helps you in the 11th hour or the 23rd hour. It's always like you just keep breathing. You're staying up at night because you're worried about stuff. How is this going to work? I can't see how this is going to work, Lord. I can't see with my physical eyes how you're going to fix this, But he does, and something will happen, and you'll be okay. And like I feel like I don't want to downplay or discount the difficulty, the degrees of difficulty that we face here, and the degree of heartache that we face, and the just insane challenge of changing the way we think and actually having faith in something when we can't prove it with our natural man. I mean, that is a huge effort. It's so huge.
Yeah.
But it really does make a big difference. And so I'm just here to say it's a growing, and it's a continuing effort all the time for me, even um, especially when I feel like he's when I feel inspired to do something he's telling me to do that I don't want to do, and I don't think it's going to work. That's when I have to just say, okay, I don't want what I want. I want what you want, because I know that what you want is going to make me the happiest in the end. But I sure have a hard time saying I don't want what I want.
Yeah. Well, see, it's because we're seeing what we can see. Once again, we see what we can see. Our perspective is like everything in front of us, right to here. We can't see behind us.
Mm.
We can't see too far away, but he can. And he has a much better, bigger plan than we do. It also makes me think about perspective for a minute. Um, sometimes our perspective is what gets us through things. I mean, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm saying that the wrong way, but I'm reminded of a sister in law that I had once that struggled, and she was not a nice woman. She wasn't honest. She tore a lot of people down around her. And one day she confided in me and said, I just want you to know I'm this way because I went through this challenge as a young child. I think it was probably sexual abuse from her uncle. And it got me thinking, one out of every four was a statistic 20 years ago of
Yeah, and more
sexual
now.
abuse with girls. I can say, I went through that as a child. Um, but when I want to hold on to that problem, hold on to that um, bad experience and let it be the reason why I don't want to change and I don't want to grow from that experience. Um, that's a challenge that holds us back. We go through these challenges to learn and grow and develop. And when we hold on to them and just use them as a crutch to maintain a lifestyle that really doesn't make us happy, what's the point? Do we have to continue to go through similar challenges I don't know.
Heaven forbid. Yeah, it's like when I was 28, I got diagnosed with a kind of arthritis that's kind of like rheumatoid. Called psoriatic arthritis. And at first, it was kind of I was having a hard time driving, holding my babies, getting them out of the bed, because I had it really bad in my wrist, my right wrist, and it was affecting the bones and eating away the bones, and it was just a mess. And I at first I was, because it was new, I was telling people about it, and I and I was really, I wanted sympathy, is what I wanted. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you poor thing, that's so terrible. I wanted to be validated and stuff like that. And over time, I learned that the more I talked about that, the worse I felt, because I was focusing on the negative and the pain and the just the despair. I was focusing on the despair, and the more despairing I was, the more response I got from people. But then the more they were sympathetic to me and felt bad and, oh, you poor thing, and blah blah blah. I mean, it was just like a downward spiral, and I just felt worse and worse. And finally, I just said, okay, Lord, I'm just gonna turn a page every day. In my book, I got a blessing, and that was the vision that came into the thought that came into my mind, of a big fat set of the King James scriptures with those really thin pages that they used to use back in the day. And I would turn one page every day towards getting better. And eventually I found medication. My situation has changed so much, to the point that I ran into somebody that I knew 15 years ago, and he said, "Oh, how are you? How's your poor arm?" Because he remembered, he could see what I was struggling with at the time, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I'm so much better now." And it was amazing. It's amazing to see that if you can, your pain doesn't always go away, and your problems don't always get solved, but your perspective can help you so much, and you rely on God, and that's the perfect perspective.
Yeah. It's interesting. It reminds me of a dream I had. Dreams are my thing. I have a lot of dreams. And this was a dream I had when I was 8. And in this dream, I could see that Jesus was walking down my street. And so I was running around telling everyone, Jesus is coming, Jesus is coming. And he came and he took me into the garden, and we sat in the garden bench and we talked for a while. Okay, now, of course, I never remember what we talked about except for one thing. He said, you are going to go through some really hard times, but I want you to know that I will be with you and you will get through this. And it was such a great dream. But it wasn't until years later, it's 2020 and I'm remembering that dream, and I'm remembering some of the really hard things that I had been through and that he was with me. And I thought, we all go through our hard challenges. We all go through stuff, and we can look at it in one of two ways. We can look at it in our physical eyes and our physical beings and say, look at all this crap we went through. Why do we have to suffer? Why did we have to be so miserable and so broke? And why did we have to live in the streets? And why did we have to, whatever the situation is, why do I have to be gay? Why do I have to have my parents die early? Why did I go through, Stephen Curtis Chapman, who several years ago, 10 years ago, had an accidental run over. He backed over his 3-year-old daughter. Why would he have to suffer through that? Why do we go through these really hard challenges? But if we can look at the perspective of, bring God into the picture, if we can take our focus off the misery of the experience, because we all have them, and find the Lord in those experiences. I mean, Jesus is the answer to everything. He's the answer. And finding him in these difficult situations and also furthers our relationship with him, because we can see what he's doing in our life. We can see the changes he's making in us through refining us and, manipulating the situations to help us become who he wants us to be, you know?
Yeah, so we just want to give you all some encouragement in your own trials and the trials of other people, to be patient and try to help you try to focus on the good and try to see the good. And the more you look for the good, the more you will see with your spiritual eyes.
And he is in your life, whether you recognize him or not. He's there. I have one more experience I have to share. I'll close it with the story. It's my wild hair story. No, it's not. It has nothing to do with my hair. So I was talking to a friend, and this is a story from somebody else. And oftentimes when we tell a story from someone else, it is a story. I might not get all the details 100% because I don't retain 100% of everything. So I might miss a little bit. But this story, this was a couple who were looking to adopt more underprivileged children, and they got a call from somebody who said, look, we need you to take this daughter. She has been in a very abusive, in every way, abusive situation. She's 8 years old, and that might not be the exact age. She might be a little bit younger than that, but she's quite young. She's been physically, sexually, mentally abused by her parents, both parents, and we've got to get her out of the situation. Will you take her? And immediately this couple said yes. And those of you who take on children that have issues like that, it's a hard situation to help a child who's been so traumatized. But the answer was immediately, yes, I'll take this daughter. So they went to pick her up at the home, and they were collecting all the daughter's things. And she looked at them and said, what about my brother? And they said, what brother? The brother that lives in the woods behind our house. They said, we didn't know you had a brother. And she said, yeah, I have a brother. So they went out and got this boy. He was feral. The parents had completely kicked him out of the home. He was living on his own in the woods. Of course, our first thought is, where's God? Where is a God in that would let this little boy suffer? But hopefully by the end of the story, you'll see he was there the whole time. They take the boy home, and it's been a challenge. But they eventually adopt both of the kids, and they're now their children. And they decide they want to take them to the temple and have them sealed to their family. They go to the temple, and the little boy sees a big picture of Jesus on the wall. And he says, "That's my friend. That is my friend right there." And the father said, "Well, what do you mean, friend?" "That was my friend that would come and play with me in the woods all the time. And I haven't seen him for a long time, but he used to be there all the time for me." And it was just such a surprise to the father. 3 days later, one of the other little boys has a dream, and in the dream, Jesus comes to him and says, "I just want you to give him a message, this little boy. I want you to tell him that he is my friend and I will always love him. But now I have to go be with other little boys in other little woods." Friends, he's there through our challenges. Whether you recognize it or not, he is there. We only see what we want to see. So I wanted to share that with you. Don't lose faith in a God you can't see. Lean into finding him, and you can see what he does in your life. Anyway, sorry I'm being a crybaby, but there you go. I hope that these little podcasts make a difference in your life. They make a difference in ours. We love doing them.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
And until next time, have a great day.